So I'm playing around with the component locations right now, and I have the Electric Railroad Cruise Commander set up kind of temporarily here just to try out the drivetrain, and this is how it runs at speed step 1. You can see it's gonna crawl real nice, and this is in cruise control mode right now, cruise on 100 step or whatever. So I'm probably gonna have to adjust some of these locations. I'm not sure I can use this 3-board setup, although I do have a shorter motherboard coming for the Rail Sounds 3-board setup, but I don't know, even though this is a nice long tender, I don't know if I'll be able to fit everything. And I'm gonna have to stick with the Baby Fat Boy J1a setup here. I checked out my other option for putting the speakers and the housing in here, and it was too wide. So I'm probably gonna have to cut this down, maybe about 1/8 of an inch, and try to make it look pretty, but I think this is kind of what we're gonna look like at some point. So I got the lid cut off this guy, and now I'm gonna take it over to the belt sander and try to knock it down a bit. So here's my cut down custom speaker housing for the Baby Fat Boys, and I just thought I'd put a little logo on there just for a little added flair, whatever. Maybe someday somebody will open this thing up and go, what the? But anyway, as you see under here, I had to drill out another set of holes for the second speaker, and I used my Harbor Freight drill press, which kind of puts holes in the same zip code as the piece you're working on. So it came out okay for a hack job. I did have to cut this rail back a little bit, and I fixed up the Katy coupler. I got a couple more 2mm cap screws in there, and I got these nice 3D printed shims. I got a bunch of different thicknesses. I was able to use one of these. These are pretty nice. So that's the final location for the speakers. They're gonna have to stay there, and I tried to just take advantage of all the holes that were already punched through the frame. So I think this should work out okay. Here's the pickup roller for the tender. It was originally mounted in one of these holes just behind the front truck, directly to the frame, and I wanted to hide it a little better, so I repurposed it to this location. And I had to kind of come up with a low profile mounting arrangement here, so you can see my custom low profile 3mm screw I did with a Dremel. Not the prettiest thing, but you'll never see it, and it won't interfere with this boss for the truck is pretty low profile, so there isn't a whole lot of clearance in there. I also had to solder the lead directly to the roller, so because it's so low profile, I ended up dremeling off the finish, and got my Hacko station here up to 850, and was able to convince this to take a little solder blob, and so there you go. So here's the tender frame. I think I'm done drilling on it. I think I have the final locations for everything. This little platform is for the 3-board setup I came up with, and there's a kind of a tunnel underneath there for all the wiring, and there's a tunnel going that way, and I'll show you later. But I also ground out a little spot here to just heat sink grease the electric railroad board. It's always a nice thing to do for it. So get ready to put this together. So here's the antenna. It's just one of those old TMCC sheet metal antennas, and it's just been heat shrunk and then super glued here into a slot that I kind of gouged away at with a screwdriver into the coal here. It's kind of brutal looking, but it works pretty good. This is how I do all my antennas now, and it keeps me from having to insulate the tender shell from the tender frame, and it just never comes out right. You take it apart to work on it, and then you lose your signal. So this is the way I do them. I've been doing them for a few years like this now. It's so much easier. That way I can just screw the shell back to the frame without doing anything special. Here's all the coal I captured. So I'm going to pour it back into the tender here. So there it is. Now I'll just drip some CA over it. So I'm getting ready to reassemble the tender here, and I just wanted to go over all the things I've done to get it to this point. So as you know, I wanted to use this J1a sound set from the early 2000s. It's got the correct whistle, correct bell. I did find a more fitting motherboard for the three board setup here, and this is from my stash. I believe it's an old Digital Dynamics board, so all the connections are here. The other board, there was no clean way to get serial to it because it was designed to be used with that 8020 IR serial tether, IR tether Lionel likes to use. So this was much nicer. Digital Dynamics was a company that made TMCC upgrade components in the early 2000s. And it was nice that I found this in my stash because it gave me, I think, an extra 1/4 of an inch clearance, and I could get everything on this frame. Even though it's a pretty big tender, it was still kind of a challenge to get everything in here. I wanted my dual speakers. I have them in this Lionel legacy era dual baby fat boy setup, and this is nice because these speakers are kind of isolated to this structure. I don't rattle the whole tender because this is a pretty loud sound set, and it's going to sound pretty nice, I think. I was able to recycle the MTH tether, and I learned a few things about the way MTH did stuff. It's kind of interesting. 4 of the wires were actually like a larger gauge, I guess, to pick up track power and supply the motor. So there's a couple iterations of these connections. I have it secured under here with a custom-made strain relief. That's the run program switch. There was a convenient location. What I was also trying to do during this upgrade was use the existing holes that were drilled either from the factory or during the PS3 upgrade, trying to use them to the best advantage, so I wasn't turning the frame into a Swiss cheese, you know. So I've got everything kind of set up, you know. It won't interfere with reassembly of the tender shell. And as you can see, I've been using these little mini JST connectors. You could just buy like a dozen of these off eBay in a pack. And I'm using a 3mm clear LED for the rear light. And I did some other things too. I was showing you that third pickup roller I added. You know, everything had to be low profile. I did find out the hard way too that this thing needed real serious ground help. It had almost no ground pickup from the tender at all. You know, it was trying to, complete the circuit through this mount, this spring mount. That just didn't work. So I used these little ground lugs and some fastening hardware, some 2mm fasteners, and ran some auxiliary grounds from both trucks. So you can see I'm adding that's just a styrene block. I'm adding a brake hose to this too. So when it gets assembled, I'll do a little bit more cosmetic stuff on the frame and then just get this prepped, I guess, for weathering. And I'll show you what I do to fill these markers too, because these are just going to be filled. I'm not going to put any lights back in them. So we're almost ready to go. So here's a headlight. It's pretty basic. Third rail cores it out for like a grain of wheat bulb. A 3mm LED fits right in there. Of course, the sides, these number boards, they didn't have any glazing at all, so I just I cut up some scrap acrylic and it's just kind of press fit in there now. So I was looking at these on the internet, and it appears the whole interior of these things are painted white. And the headlight is actually, the actual bulb is pretty far back in there, so it seems like a single headlight bulb lights up everything. So I'm gonna paint the can white on the inside, and then I'll probably try to paint the back silver. And then, like I said, I got this LED, and I kind of chucked this in the Dremel just to turn down that little flange on there, and I may install an LED in here. So I also need to make a lens. It's really common to get third rails and the lenses are long gone, and I'll show you how I make them. It's pretty simple. So here's our headlight with the can painted on the inside, and you can see by the reflection I got a lens in there, and the lens is nothing too fancy. Just go on eBay and get yourself a set of these leather punches for like, I don't know, $5 or $6. There's a bunch of them. And then just bop one out of some clear styrene or acetate or whatever they call this stuff these days. But that's it. That's all you need. So I'm going to try to figure out what I want to put in here for either an LED or an actual GOW bulb. I don't know. We'll see. So I fill small lenses like this with this gallery glass. I've had this bottle for years. Apparently this is used for stained glass hobbyists or something, but I got this at Michael's years and years ago, and it's lasted forever. Basically, you just kind of dab it in there. I filled the back of these markers with some styrene rod. But you just fill it, let it dry, and then you can keep dabbing a little more on until you get, you know, like a little lens shape or whatever going. But it will dry crystal clear. It's pretty nice. So it'll probably take a while to dry, possibly overnight. But sometimes I'll also use it for setting glass or filling in gaps in the corners of glass. It's water soluble, so you can kind of use it to fill clear gaps, and it dries very, very clear. So we'll check it out later. So here are the components in the engine itself. As you can see, I've got a Gunrunner John Chuff Generator, and this counts pulses off of a flywheel and divides them up and sends a chuff input back to the electric railroad board in the tender. So it needs a 5-volt power supply, and if you use a super chuffer with a smoke unit, you can get 5 volts off that. But since I'm not running smoke and I'm not going to have the smoke controls, he made these little 5-volt DC power supplies at one time. They're pretty nice. So it's living down here all nice and snug behind the tether and the socket. This is the MTH tether and socket arrangement that I kind of recycled from the original PS3 electronics. This board needs kind of like a Chuff Cal switch. That's these 2 white wires here, and this was the original third rail Sooth smoke unit switch, so I used that as the Chuff Cal switch. So the idea is that you power it up, put the Cal switch, I think you short out the Cal switch, and then you move the drivers a quarter turn for 4 chuffs, and then you change the position of the switch and then cycle power, and you should be pretty close. So pretty neat. I've got this little micro JST connector for the engine lighting, so there's power and ground, and then there's a headlight control line from the cruise board. And this yellow line is the work light that is controlled off of the Chuff generator, and I've got a little cab light that turns on and off with that. I'll show you that later when I put the shell back on, but that's kind of what we look like in the engine, so I'm hoping to get it reassembled tomorrow. Here's what the lighting connections look like inside the engine. So here's that micro JST connector, and you can see I have some dropping resistors for the LEDs I've used. So I've got one LED kind of across track power, and that's up here in the back head. I glued it in there, and it kind of lights the cab. And then there's also a really tiny LED by the engineer that I'll show you under power later. And then these lines run up to the headlight up the front, which is all set up now. I've got a 3mm LED in the headlight housing, so check that out tomorrow when I get it all put back together. I just wanted to show you something real quick, something I was playing with, another experiment. Usually during all these projects I take a little time to goof off and experiment with something new. This here is an RPR 220. It's kind of a photo sensor, so it's an IR LED and a photo transistor, and it's kind of a photo reflective sensor. And the idea was I wanted to use it as a chuff pickup, and I wanted to put it on the back side of a driver and you know, divide up the driver into four, and you know, put like 4 silver stripes on it and have this pick it up and input it into the sound. And I thought it was a pretty cool little experiment to play with. It was a non-contact way of generating chuff. You know, you can use a cam with a micro switch, or you can use a reed switch and magnets, but I thought this was cool. And I did play around with it, and I filmed some video, but it was kind of obnoxious. I found that you could power the IR LED with half-wave filtered DC, you know, just off the track power, diode and a dropping resistor. I think the LED can take up to 50 milliamps. Anyway, it did actually work, but my big problem was finding a way to fixture it up in the engine, you know. I was gonna glue it underneath the frame, but it's kind of large and I didn't want it to be seen behind the driver. I also thought about maybe putting it in this well and picking up stripes off of an axle. But then it kind of got me into thinking, like, you know, I need a more pro setup as far as, you know, making some kind of little fixture, because you do have to adjust them, and I thought it'd be neat to have an adjustable fixture made up at some point. So that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of checking out like 3D printers and stuff and making little adapter things like that. But I thought this was kind of cool, you know. I got like 50 of these for like 11 bucks off eBay, so I'll use them for something eventually. I have a third rail E6 that I've never really figured out how to put sound into, so this might be a good candidate for that. I gotta find a speaker small enough, and I don't think I can use something like the Chuff Generator. The tender wheels are less than half of the diameter of the drivers on the E6. They're a pretty big driver, so it would give me an undesirable chuff rate. So I don't know, maybe someday I'll actually get to use this successfully, but I thought it was kind of neat to play with.